Hello, this short web seminar is from the U.S. Civics Training Initiative. The title is The Founders as Deists, What is Deism, and Were They Deists? And this is a frequent question and conversation that's had in society today. Well, first, let's take a look at what deism is. Well, let's take a look at a practical definition of deism. A deism would be the belief in a God who created the universe and then abandoned it, assuming no control over life, exerting no influence on natural phenomena, and giving no supernatural revelation. Like some grand watchmaker that made the watch and then went off for a long walk. It therefore follows that deism would believe God is not involved in his creation, is not involved in providential activity, is not going to hold men accountable for their actions, is not personal, cannot be prayed to, does not lead or guide, and does not provide insight or wisdom, and does not act in history. A biblical worldview of God believes these things in contrast. A biblical worldview would believe that God is involved in his creation, that he is involved in providential activity, is going to hold men accountable for their actions, is personal, can be prayed to, does lead and guide, does provide insight or wisdom, does act in history. With those two sets of contrasting lists, I'm going to take a brief look at two founders and ask, were they deists? And I'm simply going to look at some quotes, one quote from Benjamin Franklin and one quote from Thomas Jefferson for the sake of contrasting a deist worldview versus a biblical worldview. At the Constitutional Convention, Benjamin Franklin was the senior member as he had already achieved 80-plus years of age, and when the convention got bogged down, he rose to his feet, addressed George Washington, who was the presiding officer at the Constitutional Convention, and said this: "In the beginning of the contest with Great Britain, when we were sensible of danger, we had daily prayer in this room for divine protection. Our prayers, sir, were heard, and they were graciously answered. All of us who were engaged in the struggle must have observed frequent instances of a superintending providence in our favor. To that kind providence we owe this happy opportunity of consulting in peace on the means of establishing our future national felicity. And have we now forgotten that powerful friend, or do we imagine we no longer need his assistance? I have lived, sir, a long time, and the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs in the affairs of men, and if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without his notice, is it probable that an empire can rise without his aid? We've been assured, sir, in the sacred writings, that except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. I firmly believe this, and I also believe that without his concurring aid we shall succeed in this political building no better than the builders of Babel. We shall be divided by our partial local interests, our projects will be confounded, and we ourselves shall become a reproach and a byword down to future ages." Now, there's a lot that could be taught and read about Franklin, and I frankly don't know exactly what his personal faith in Christ was at the time of his passing. But if you look at this quote and contrast it with the list of deist characteristics versus a biblical worldview, you would have to say that Franklin's quote invokes all these characteristics. That God's involved in creation, he's involved in providential activity, he holds men and nations accountable for his actions, he's personal because he can be prayed to, he does lead and guide, he does provide for insight and wisdom, and he does act in history. And so by this measure, Franklin is working off a biblical worldview and not a distant watchmaker that's off for a long walk that would be more descriptive of a deistic set of beliefs. Now let's take a look at Jefferson. This is a briefer quote from Thomas Jefferson, but you can watch some additional seminars on his perspectives and how he was very supportive of Christianity and its role in the founding of the nation and its guiding principles for our government. But to this brief quote we turn. "The God who gave us liberty, or gave us life, gave us liberty. And can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis, a conviction in the minds of people that these liberties are a gift of God, that they are not to be violated but with his wrath? Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, and His justice cannot sleep forever. Now, in this webinar, I am not trying to narrow down and come to the personal faith convictions of both Jefferson and Franklin, but as far as this quote and the biblical and the worldview they operated under a biblical worldview. These two quote sets, along with literally hundreds of others, would reveal that case, and so it kind of puts to rest the idea of them being deists versus operating from a biblical worldview. Aside from their personal faith, we can say that they saw a biblical worldview and a God that was active in the affairs of men, that would lead and guide, that was involved in His creation and could be prayed to, and also was just and would hold men accountable, were squarely dead center in their system of beliefs as they formed and implemented this new form of government of freedom and liberty. My name's Craig Seibert. Thanks for listening.